Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
Welcome to Your Town Matters. I'm Natalie Sturgeon. My guest today is the mayor of the village of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. Hi.
Hi, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's my first time on the island, so I'm really glad to be here. I want to start with the air ambulance. What's the latest on sort of its permanent station here and the air hangar?
So the plane has been here on the island all winter. There were a couple of times during the winter, during storms, that we thought they were going to have to move it. They had called to let us know, Ambulance New Brunswick, but they ended up being able to keep it here. And I think we need to give a big shout out to the Voyager staff and to Ambulance New Brunswick for their commitment to keeping that plane here, because they certainly went above and beyond this winter. I also have to give a shout out, as always, to the paramedics and the doctors and nurses who are responsible for getting patients, looking after them. They have a big responsibility, and they're playing a really big role in this as well. So at this point, the shell of the hangar is constructed. The concrete plant is opening in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, and we'll have the floor. And so we've delayed the door until the floor is run, because it has to be anchored into the floor. And so given the timing and where we were in the winter, it just made sense to wait and do it all at once instead of doing a temporary fix and then coming back and redoing it. So we expect the door will be on hopefully in the next few weeks, but in the meantime, the shell of it's built and we look like we're nearing the home stretch on the hangar. So we're really excited to be nearing the end of this project and to be able to put, a final bow on finishing this up.
And when you and I talked, you said the municipality isn't in the air hangar building business. What have you learned through this process about building a building like that?
I have learned that post-disaster specifications are way more stringent than you could even begin to imagine. I have learned that we have a very good construction crew here on the island. I have to give them a shout out, because they probably had one of the worst winters as far as cold and ice, and they soldiered through in some winds and very cold temperatures, putting rafters up and getting the building standing. And we certainly appreciate their efforts to getting us to the point where we have a place to keep the plane, where the hangar's built, and that things are nearing completion. So, a big shout out to them, because they really went above and beyond for the community.
What has it done for the community to have that airplane here on the island for them in the event there's an emergency?
I think for people, it's just that sense of relief of knowing that the plane is here, that there is a way to get off the island if it's, after the ferry stopped running, if it's a serious case, that we have that, services here. And then I think what people maybe are not quite as aware of, but with the advanced care paramedics, they certainly have taken some of the pressure off as well, to have that extra layer of scope of practice here on the island too, to be able to assist patients in need.
Okay, moving now to the former Scotiabank building. You've said there's an update. What's going on over there?
So over the winter, our Rotary has been working and have raised money and have acquired an optometry chair. And now they're raising money for some additional equipment, and they have rebuilt a room. I just had a tour earlier this week that will be able to house optometry testing. They've done some renos in another part of the building and installed a dental x-ray machine and upgraded the dental facilities that were there. So really it's a top of the line dental practicing station. We're going to have optometry testing. And so, on the optometry front, for people, particularly I'm thinking of the residents of the nursing home, who can't go to get their eyes tested as easily as, you know, some of us who are living on our own. For them to be able to come and get their eyes tested is just a huge thing for the community, for kids to be able to go. So now, you know, in addition to all the other services, we have those things available here on the island. And, you know, we talk a lot about health care and what happens in an emergency or when you need primary care. But sometimes the prevention is as important as, you know, what happens after the fact, and to avoid getting to that point. So to be able to have those things here on the island is just huge for the community. So we're really excited to see these things roll out probably later on this spring into summer.
And for those who don't understand why that's important, can you explain to non-islanders why having such just even pieces of the puzzle are very important?
Sure. So it's one of those things that I think as islanders we kind of take for granted that people understand. But if your child needs to go to the dentist or you need to get your eyes tested, you are getting up to be at the ferry terminal at 6:45 a.m. to catch the first ferry. You are not coming home likely until you'll get home at 7 o'clock that night, because it is a full day to get to the city to do your appointments and come home. You have the cost not only of your appointment that is standard for everybody, but you have your ferry ticket, you have your car gas, and you have your meals while you're traveling. And to top it off, you're not losing a couple of hours pay, you're losing the entire day's pay to go and do this. So for people, it's a huge expense. And, you know, we certainly saw people, you know, just anecdotally talking to people, we know they weren't going to the dentist once the dentist closed here on the island because it was just too onerous to get there. So to be able to have those facilities here to, you know, ensure people have good dental health, have good eyesight, all of those things. And like I said, for the people at the nursing home to have a denturist coming to the island, you know, I've driven by and seen the nursing home bus parked outside the building, and it's like, okay, I feel good that the people that are living there are still having the same access to health care that people on the mainland do. And so it's just a really big thing for the island.
Okay. And this is your second winter under a new plowing pilot or public works pilot. What have you learned, I guess, in the second year of that pilot?
We learned that we can have a really bad winter still on Graham and Am, because like everywhere, wow, January was a lot. And we had snow here that I was on the mainland for the day, and it was a beautiful day, and I came home and there was 6 inches of snow here on the ground. So it's one of those things that we just had snow and melt and ice, and they certainly had their challenges this winter. So I've got to give them a shout out. They have done a tremendous job trying to keep up. So for us, it's been good to have, you know, a good winter to start, and then maybe a not so good winter just to see how they compare and what the expectations are going to be. We are entering in discussions now. We've given notice to the province that we would like to continue beyond our 2-year pilot. We feel it was successful. I think they feel it was successful. So now it's the long-term negotiation of what this looks like beyond November 1st, because we have to talk about what the assets look like, what the costs are going to be, how this looks going down the road. So, and those discussions, of course, are going to take time, and that's what we're working on, which is why we started 6 months early. So, you know, we're hopeful. We expect that we're going to be able to come to an agreement, and I think it will be a good thing long term for the island and for the village.
So you talked about discussing what it might cost and the assets. You're talking about taking over the plows and things like that are...
Exactly. So right now we're using the government garage. We've got a short-term lease on that. If we do this long-term, if this becomes our responsibility, we're going to need a garage. So what does acquisition of that look like? How do we go about doing that? We had to purchase the plows that we're using. So we have 2 of the best shape but end-of-life plows that we could purchase from DTI. But they're old, and so we recognize that we're going to have to look at, you know, funds to replace those down the road. Like, these are some of the planning things that we're going through, and making sure that whatever we do, we're going to be able to do that within the budget constraints of both the village and the province, but making sure we set the budget envelope at a place that we're not tying anybody's hands. And a bad winter like what we just had isn't going to mean we aren't able to do some of the necessary repairs in the summer, that we still have that budget envelope. So, yeah.
Do you think that it's more helpful to kind of put that in the hands of Grand Mananners who understand kind of the roads and streets and sort of the weather that happens over here as opposed to on the mainland?
I think so, and I think that one of the things we've been able to do as a municipality is, for example, we have a truck that's used by our rec department. And when we were really getting a lot of snow this winter, we commandeered our rec staff and their truck, and they were out plowing roads too, just to try to keep up with some of what was happening. So it gives us, extra staff to be able to pull from, to put those assets to use that maybe wouldn't have been necessarily been with the provincial department here on the island, but it makes sure that, what we spent money on, we're getting good value for our money too.
Okay, the next is the recycling program, another first for the island. Walk us through what that recycling program is going to look like.
So for anybody on the mainland, this will be a little bit redundant, but for people on Grand Manan, this is kind of a big thing for us. And, people have been looking for some recycling for a while. Right now, we will do corrugated cardboard and some basic things, but this is going to expand to basically consumer packaging. Cereal boxes, that type of cardboard, plastic bottles, some of those types of things. We're going to have pickup, bi-weekly pickup, which is also going to be a completely new thing for the island. And we are hoping to have the contract ready and signed, and we will do that on behalf of Circular Materials, who will pay us to do it. And then that will be delivered to Lawrence Station, where they pick it up for the rest of the area. We also are planning to have a blue bin at the transfer station, so if you miss your pickup day or you are somewhere where you can't get the truck, you still have the option to take your recycling to the transfer station, and people are going there obviously anyway. And it's voluntary. I mean, that I think is the other big thing is, people don't like to be told what to do, so this is completely, it's up to the individual if they want to do it. But from the municipality standpoint, we're really hoping that there is good uptake, because there is a cost to moving our garbage, cost of, trucking it off the island, and a cost of tipping fees when we take it to the landfill. And so any recycling that we do that diverts that waste from our mainstream of garbage ends up saving money for the village, which in the long term is good for everybody. So I'm sure there's going to be some hiccups and bumps along the way, but we're aiming for a May 1st start. So there'll be some more information coming out for residents once we get everything set up and we know what day it is going to be, what it's going to look like. There'll be a sign-up process, and we'll go through all that with people. But we're excited to get this started and see how this does turn out for the island.
Was there a learning curve? Was there anything that surprised you in that process of kind of navigating that contract and understanding the process?
I think yes, because it's a completely new thing again for us. I mean, it's not something that we normally do. I mean, we're very used to taking our own garbage, taking that to the landfill. But I think there was also a learning curve on the part of Circular Materials, because coming and doing a weekly pickup on Grand Manan is a little bit more complicated than it is in Eastern Charlotte, just across the bay. So I think when they realized what some of the logistical challenges were on Grand Manan, it made a lot more sense to partner with us to be able to do something that made sense for Grand Manan and also provided the service that they needed. So it's a short-term contract to start out with, just for everybody, another one of those trials, just to see what it looks like and see, what we've forgotten, what they've forgotten. But I'm hopeful that it's going to work out, and this is going to be a good thing for the island.
Okay, you spent the last 2 days, I think, roughly, in Fredericton, discussing fiscal reform as it relates to municipalities. What were you able to glean from those meetings?
So I think just for anybody who maybe isn't as involved with municipal finance as some of us find ourselves, fiscal reform is basically the second part of the local governance reform. And on Grand Manan, we didn't see the first part of that because we didn't face amalgamation. There was no change to our municipal boundaries. But as part of that, there were additional responsibilities given to the region. There was a fund set up, the Regional Services Support Fund, to support some of those, but in order to access those funds for the region, it needs to be matched. The funding for the Regional Services Support Fund comes from the unconditional grants that were given to municipalities that are being cut by 20% a year over 5 years. So it's left municipalities in this place where we're having to fund more things at the same time when our grants are being cut. In addition to that, the grants have not always kept up with inflation. They've been cut over the years, and it's made municipalities more and more reliant on property tax. So for people, when you get your property tax assessment, which have gone up, it's created more money for municipalities based on wherever we set the tax rate, but it's also meant that we're more reliant on that because we're not getting other streams of income from grants and those sorts of things. The province has recognized that as an issue, and that's what the second part of the municipal reform, the fiscal reform piece is. The timeline, what we're hearing is hopefully in May there will be regulations tabled, and I think we're all anxious to see what it's going to be in the regulations, what that's going to mean for municipalities, and hopefully that will be in place. Our understanding and what we were told is that it will be in place in plenty of time for us as we enter into the 26 budgeting process late summer into early fall. So hopefully that'll give us a little bit of stability, give us maybe another potential source of revenue so we're not as reliant on property taxes as what we are right now.
And when I've talked to other mayors, we've talked about it kind of being like a double-edged sword, because if you lower the property tax, it burdens the municipality, and if you up the tax rate, it burdens the residential ratepayer. Do you have similar feelings about that? It's just because and the Union of Municipalities has talked a little bit about how they wish there was more education about that kind of imbalance that's created because you rely so heavily on property tax.
Sure, and I think an easy example for us on Grand Manan is we purchase a fire truck every 8-ish years, 8 to 10. We're closing in on 10 just because of supply chain issues. So 10 years ago when we bought a fire truck, it was around $400,000. And every budget, we put money into our budget to put into our capital reserve so that when it's time to purchase the next fire truck, because it's a standard thing, we'll have a nest egg to start the down payment so we're not borrowing as much. We get one paid off, we move on to the next one. In 10 years, the price of a fire truck doubled. And so the only place we have to pay for that is from property tax. And that's one easy example. But as the cost of everything has gone up, it's gone up for municipalities too. And I think that that's the struggle for everybody sitting around the table because, we all pay property tax too. So you don't want to say, let's just, we'll just raise taxes, it'll be fine, we can all cover it. But we also have to be responsible to make sure that we are covering things like the purchase of a new fire truck and getting the solid waste from the transfer station to the mainland. All of those things that we are responsible to do. Once we get beyond paying for the things we need to do, it's starting to cut into some of the things we want to do and some of the things that maybe aren't even wants but are not quite as high a priority needs. And so it becomes a real juggling process, and it is hard. And so, we all recognize that whatever we spend, it's coming out of property tax. And so to have another stream of money from somewhere, that is a good thing to take some of that reliance off.
So council has sent a tourism levy to bylaw committee. I wonder if you could just explain what a tourism levy is and why council is kind of floating the idea.
Sure. So I think a lot of people, when it's one of those things that you pay when you go to a hotel and you probably don't even pay a lot of attention to. It's called some places a destination marketing fee. There's different names for it, but a lot of municipalities across the province, across the country even, have it. And there is legislation in New Brunswick that allows municipalities to set that rate. And what can be done with it is things to enhance tourism, to promote tourism, or to provide infrastructure for tourism. And certainly Grand Manan is a tourist destination. And so it goes back to the fiscal reform piece that we just talked about. Anything the village does to enhance tourism or to provide infrastructure facilities, right now it's coming out of property tax. And so this is another potential source of funding that's not dependent on residents to pay. It's paid by visitors to the island, but it could be used for things that would, maybe we could do some tourism promotion, particularly during the off-season, spring and summer, that are lovely on the island, but maybe not as busy as the prime summer months. But it also means we could do things for infrastructure, things like maybe there's a water cache on a trail that we could set up, or maybe washroom and changing stations at one of the beaches. Some of those things that would be a benefit for both the community and for tourism, but it would be a way to pay for it without saying, okay, we need to increase property taxes X amount to be able to do this. It's another source of revenue for the village. That's really what the incentive was, or what part of the impetus was to start talking about it. I recognize that there is some concern from tourism operators, and maybe I think that there was probably some misinformation on Facebook about how large the levy would be. And that's why it went to bylaw committee, is to talk about what some of the numbers would look like, what level we think where we want to be, and then be able to go out and have a conversation when we actually have some facts in front of us. And that's what we're working on right now. We're pulling some numbers from our visitor information stats, some of the things that we do have here on the island, to be able to say, like, okay, this could be what we're looking at. Here are some of the things that we can do, and then maybe we're going to go talk to the tourism operators, have some of those public type of consultations, and then come back once we have the bylaw ready, once we've done all those steps. So I think there was some concern that when we said we were going to bylaw committee, that this was going to be enacted in the next 30 days. This is a long process. We were hoping, maybe we'd be moving a little bit faster, but we also want to make sure we're doing it right. So if that takes more time, it takes some more time.
In that same vein, what are you expecting for tourism season this year?
Well, given the uncertainty that's going on right now in the political climate, not just in Canada, but mostly outside of Canada, I think this could be a very busy summer again on Grand Manan for tourism. It feels a little bit like COVID during those summers when we couldn't travel outside of the Maritimes and people were really looking for places local to travel. Grand Manan saw a lot of tourism those summers, and it feels like it could be another one of those years as well. Combined with the fact that, the US dollar is so high right now, coming to Canada becomes a lot more economical for them, which is a good thing, but it also complicates an already busy ferry service that we have here on the island. 2 years ago, we had our summer ferry schedule was extended by 3 weeks. It was again last year. We anticipate it will be again this year, that it's part of the schedule. But really, the ferry is busy year-round now. January, February, March tend to be the least busy months, and it has been busy this winter. Like it's almost a year-round thing that the ferry is at capacity or nearing capacity on some of the primary trips. And so that's one of the things that we are talking about with DTI is how do we extend the shoulder season for the 5, recognizing that there are impacts with dry docks and other things like that we also have to accommodate. But also, as our industry is growing, whether it's tourism, whether it's the seafood industry, we need the predictability and the capacity on the ferry to be able to ship product from Grand Manan to the mainland, and for the people who are living here to be able to get to the mainland to do the things that they need to do as well.
Well, now that you brought up ferry capacity, I want to talk about the replacement of the Grand Manan 5.
Sure.
Where are you at with kind of looking at the options for what you could accomplish with that ferry?
So we're continuing to talk with Coastal Transport and with the province. The province is undertaking studies right now. They're looking at they're doing a traffic analysis, which is obviously part of it. They're looking back at the procurement process for the adventure to see lessons learned from that. And they're hoping to have some recommendations on what some options are because, the Grand Manan 5 is 35 years old this summer and the Adventure is 14. So we are nearing end of life on the Grand Manan 5 and a sort of a midlife on the Adventure. And so it's an appropriate time to be having those conversations. But like everything, it's a slow-moving process and ferries are expensive, and so we need to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing for the island and it's the right thing for the taxpayers in New Brunswick as well.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts that you have or that you want to talk about in terms of Grand Manan.
I think we've covered most of them. I had a list and we compared our list before we sat down, so I think we've covered most of those things. I think, we've talked about Grand Manan and tourism in the summer, and I'm just giving my final plug that Grand Manan is a lovely place to visit, and we would love to see people here this summer, whether you've been here before or not.
Well, so far my impression is great.
That's good. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
My guest today was the Mayor of the Village of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. I'm Natalie Sturgeon, and thanks for watching Your Town Matters.